Sermon series called The Jesus Experience. Yeah, it's the little guy. The Jesus Experience, and we're going through Luke's gospel. When I was growing up and what I was kind of taught to do was to kind of combine all four of the gospel stories into one large narrative, right? Like I was combined, and it was like this one story of Jesus. And I don't know, I grew tired of that because I actually started reading the Gospels, and I was like, oh, these have interesting little things in them. Like, they're different parts of the story. They're showing us a different facet of Jesus, a different side of Jesus, each one of them. So I think it's a good and noble practice to have that one story of Jesus, but I think it's also just as good, just as noble to understand what each gospel is telling us. And that's what we're trying to do here, and we're calling Luke's story the Jesus Experience. And what we see as he began with his baptism, and then we saw that he was doing something new, that the kingdom of God was coming onto stage. And when we talk about the kingdom of God, I want you guys to think of this, because this is my way of describing the kingdom of God. You will see the kingdom of God when you see miracles, healings, and parties. Right? So miracles, healings, and parties, those are the things that you'll see in the kingdom of God. And that's what we see when Jesus is on the move, that he's doing all these miracles, healings, and parties. And then last week we saw how it's this all or nothing affair. That he says that, listen, the kingdom of God is for the least of these, for the poor, the outcasts, the widowed, right? Those who mourn, all those things in the Beatitudes. And he says that the kingdom of God is about loving your neighbor as yourself, loving your enemy despite what he would like to do to you. That's what he keeps on saying. So with all of that in the back of our mind, we look forward to today in Luke chapter 7. And we're going to go through the whole chapter today. We're going to blitz it, all right? This sermon's going to be an hour and a half, right? Just kidding. Hour, 15 minutes. So this sermon, so if you would like, you don't have to do it. You'll just get extra points in heaven. If you have a Bible in front of you during this thing, I'm kidding. If you'd like to follow along, Luke chapter 7, because we're just going to be looking at it. I'm going to be quoting things, but I'm not going to be like putting it up there every time I quote something. So if you would like to follow along, you can, but you don't have to. All right? So the beginning of chapter 7, we see that it's about, what chapter 7 is about true faith. Right? It's about true faith. And when we encounter true faith, we encounter shock and awe. Right? That true faith is shocking, that it's awe-inspiring, that it inspires fear and all of that. And the first story is about this Roman centurion. So who was the centurion? He was a leader of the Roman army. And who was Rome, right? Remember, Israel at the time of Jesus was an occupied nation by the power of the day, by Rome. So this Roman centurion is somebody who watches over these local areas and keeps the peace. What does keep the peace mean, right? To squelch any rabble-rousing. To squelch someone going, we need independence from these people, right? Like he's there to keep the peace. But people seem to like this guy. This guy's actually kind of nice to his local people. He even builds them a church. They called it a synagogue back then, right? Like people seem to like him a lot. And things are going good for him. But he has a servant that gets sick. And people kind of come up to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, we've seen you heal a lot of people. You need to come and heal this guy's servant. Come and heal him. Listen, he's done all this great stuff. He's built us a church. He's done all this great stuff. He's not like one of those baddies out there, right? And Jesus goes over, talks to him, and he says, and the centurion tells Jesus, hey, I'm in charge of a lot of people. I tell people to come, and they come, and I tell people to go, and they go, and I know that you can do anything. I know that you can do anything, Jesus. that you can heal this servant of mine. And Jesus says this. Now, we'll go ahead and reveal it. And Jesus looks at him and says, and throws some serious shade here. He goes, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. What's he saying here? What's he saying here? This is what he's saying. And I used this description in Sunday school earlier. But imagine if China was an occupying force of us, that China invaded and now they are in charge here, right? They are in charge here. And over in the corner over there is sitting a Chinese guard, commander, right? And he's making sure that I don't, or no one in here is causing dissent, right? And then I am looking at everyone and I go, the only righteous person in here is the Chinese guy over there, right? Like that commander of that army over there. Would you guys be cool with that? No. You'd be super angry, right? You're like, what? That guy's the enemy. Yeah, he's like this, but he goes, I tell you, no one even in Israel. Ooh, right? Shocking, right? It's shock and awe. It's just nothing but shocking there. I mean, this man is culturally outside of the faith. He's an outsider. He's one that's not part of the fruit tree of the tribe of David, right? He's not of the people of Israel. And yet Jesus is saying, your faith is greater than anyone's in here. You have this great fruit. It's shocking. It's shocking. The next story is one about a widow whose son has just died. Now, let's put on our biblical glasses and understand this widow. What would happen to this widow now that her son is dead? Her husband is already dead, and now her son is dead. What does that mean for the widow? She has no means of money anymore. She doesn't have anything left. She doesn't have an ability to make money besides other things, you know? That's just how society functioned then. And so not even facing the terror of losing her son, she's also facing the terror of having no future at all. And she's weeping and she's probably surrounded by all these professional mourners all around him and all these things, and she probably can't see in 2 feet in front of you. Have you ever been in one of those situations where you're filled with so much grief or fear or whatever that you just can't even think about 2 seconds ahead of where you are right now? I think that's where this woman is. Because notice, she doesn't ask for Jesus to come over. Jesus just hears the pain and the anguish and the hurt, and he comes right over to the casket. He comes right over to that. I think they call it a beer in the not a beer like a cerveza, like a B-E-I-R. They come right over to that, which is basically a casket stand where they would carry the dead body. And Jesus comes right over and he touches it. He's not asked over. He just touches it, which would have made him unclean, right? Would have made him unclean. And he tells the boy to get up. And he comes back alive. Jesus has just raised the dead. And in verse 16 it says, and fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people. This is where we got the sermon title, Shock and Awe, from this verse. The NIV translates fear as awe. And great fear, whoa, who is this? Sometimes when Jesus brings true faith, it's shocking, right? It's shocking that he's raising a dead man to life. It's shocking that that he could do any of this. Her son is alive. Jesus has caused true faith, and it's shocking. And then we have John the Baptist. We have John the Baptist. And this is an interesting story about John the Baptist, because John sends some of his disciples to go talk with Jesus, and they ask Jesus a very weird question. They're like, Jesus, are you the one that we're waiting for, or should we expect another one? Listen, I've read the Gospels a lot. There's been a lot of times as I'm reading that I just blast through that and be like, I'll get to that later, right? Because that's a weird thing. And one of my core tenets of understanding theology is that when you see something weird in the Scriptures, let it be weird. I think sometimes we see stuff like John's disciples coming up to Jesus and going, hey, are you the Messiah, or do we need to wait for Thaddeus over here? Right? Or is there another one coming? And Jesus is like, what are you guys asking this question for, right? And I think we ask that question too. It's like, why? Was John and his disciples not at the river? Were they not at the when the Spirit came down like a dove? And it's like, what? Were they not there? And here they are, asking Jesus, are you really the one, Jesus? Why are they asking that? Why are they asking that? Is it because, now this is me reading between the lines. Is it because Jesus isn't looking like the Messiah that they thought he should? Is it because Jesus doesn't look and isn't saving the world like he thought it would? Because imagine the amount of people that thought the Messiah was going to come in, and surely by the time he was 30 years old, he would be ascending to the throne of power over Herod. And think about what you know about John the Baptist. John the Baptist and Herod had a good relationship, right? Best of buddies. For those of you that aren't in the know, later on in the story, John the Baptist's head is taken away by Herod, right? Is John going, hey, I thought, we saw some pretty incredible things from you. I kind of thought you'd be ascending to the highest mountain right now, Jesus. What are you doing, right? And what does Jesus say to him? He pulls out this full list of things. He goes, well, go back and tell John of what you've seen and heard, that the blind have received their sight, that the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news preached to them. It's shocking, right? It's shocking. He goes, don't you see all the miracles, healings, and parties that are happening? It's the real deal, is what he's saying. It's the real deal is right here. Go back and tell John that. Stop looking at your own interest for the Messiah and see what the Messiah is actually doing. Jesus is not operating in the way that they are expecting. He's not operating in any way that any of us are expecting. He's not doing anything that we would want him to do. But he's doing what the prophets said he would do. And he's bringing restoration, and it's causing shock and awe all over the place. Here's my thesis on the Gospels. If you can get through the Gospels without being offended by something that Jesus said or did, you should probably read it again. Read it closer. Because there's, I've read that stuff a lot, and I'm all about it. I'm all on the board, the Jesus train, but I'll read stuff, and I'm like, ooh, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that because we all have this image of what the Messiah is in our head, right? But I think I think if we actually met Jesus, I think we would be like, ooh, are you who you say you are, or are we waiting for somebody else? I think a lot of us would have that idea in our head because it's shocking who Jesus is. I think we've lost some of our shockingness in our faith. I think our faith has become predictable. I think our faith has become this thing that we know exactly how we're going to respond to something. I guarantee it that all the people driving by right now that are not even looking in here, they're like, oh, why is there a crowd of people? Oh yeah, it's Sunday kind of a thing. They're just driving by. I guarantee if you asked any of them, they would know exactly what our next moves are, right? They would look at us as the church, as Christians, and they would know exactly how we feel about something. They're like, oh yeah, we know exactly what they're going to do. Something big happens in the world, and they're like, yeah, that's not shocking. That's how they feel about it, you know? We know that they're going to get upset when someone tries to pass that legislation against them, rather than loving their enemies, right? We know that they're going to try to build bigger and bigger barns for themselves rather than giving away everything they have to the people outside of this. We know exactly what they're going to do. What they're going to do is nothing shocking. Like, have we lost our own shockingness of the reality of the faith in our own lives, where we know exactly what's going to happen the next day because we have planned it and we haven't relied on Jesus guiding us to the next one? That's kind of where we just live in the placidness of a well-formulated life many times. And everyone knows it. And Jesus is breaking out of those molds and doing things that are shocking. Listen, as a church here, we, I think, are on a good path. We're moving forward in a good direction right now because I want us to be about a church that does things that are shocking. The world expects us to do things that are just for ourselves. But a year ago, this church did something kind of interesting, right? Something that's a little shocking, and we're still on that path right now. A year ago, actually a little bit a year ago, we paid off our debt here, right? Which is shocking too. Listen, believe me, I know. My previous church that I was at, we were drowning in debt. Drowning in debt and like maintenance issues, neither of which we have here. We have some maintenance stuff, but not bad. But I interviewed at a church that had $14 million in debt. Woo, right? Yeah. Yeah, like they have $14 million in that. But this isn't a story about other people. It's about what happened here. About a year ago, a little committee